Eve Bernfeld, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Rabbi Josh. I'm really excited to be here. I've been enjoying the podcast a lot.
Yeah, I bet not as much as me because I love doing it. I love getting a chance to talk with all you guys. And yeah, I guess I wanted to start by asking you, what are you up to these days as an artist, as a person?
Well, I have a lot of I have a lot of irons in the fire, I feel like right now. I've just had a chapbook of poetry published, which is, maybe we'll talk about this later. It's straight out of my art lab project.
Awesome.
So
But wait, hold on, wait. Explain to the good listeners what is a chat. This has come up before, actually.
Yeah,
So
the chapbook is just a very small book. I don't mean small in, measurements, but just fewer poems than a full poetry book. And this I would call almost sort of a mini chapbook.
yeah.
And it was exactly the right medium for some very small, very short poems that I wrote a lot of. So it was very exciting to have them come
Okay.
into the world.
All right. Well, Mazel Tov. So let's circle back to that, but let's talk about the other irons in the fire.
So I am also writing a lot of fiction. Have middle grade novels in various states of. I always think of them like sewing projects, even though I don't really sew. There's a lot of people in my family who do. So they're sort of in different states on, laid out on the floor or on dress forms, metaphorically speaking.
Oh, interesting. So meaning like you might write a part that will eventually come later and then
kind of, or just, I just have this image of writing as being sort of like stitching thoughts together.
Yep.
And sometimes you have to rip out all your stitches and then reorganize
Wait,
it.
you said novels plural.
Yeah.
I mean, that's already a lot of irons in a
Yeah.
fire.
Well, yeah. Sometimes you sort of like got to a point where one has to rest for a while, and then I had a new idea this fall and have written a lot on that. So I'm at this kind of after winter break and all that, then I can dive back into both.
Nice.
But winter break being as a parent, my life is organized around that, and I teach in an academic setting too. I'm an Alexander Technique teacher, so my three kids have their own many irons in fires. So, like, I got into ukulele this, and then I got to make sure my daughter gets to basketball, and then I got to make sure we got time to light
I know. I remember the first cycle of like vacation time off when our child was born. It must have been when our first child was born, when I was in Boulder. And given when he was born, that it must have been the Passover break. Like we had a few days off for Passover, the office was closed, and I was like, "Oh my God, it's not a vacation anymore."
No,
Eliav doesn't care that I have work off. It's actually more work. Anyway, yeah, okay. So Alexander Technique teacher. I also wanted to come back and talk about that and novels and poetry. Man, you're busy.
Yeah, I would say so.
So tell me. Let's talk about the poetry. And where does poetry lie in your practice?
I write a lot. I am a notebook person. I write morning pages, my little visual aid here. I have a composition book. I have stacks and stacks of composition books that I buy if at all possible.
Me
very
too.
Nice. You're like, this is my favorite notebook, and this is my favorite pen.
You got to up your game in terms of like nice. You like those mottled.
And I especially if I can buy them at Goodwill or Scrap. That
nice.
Elevates it for me.
Okay. Sorry. So go ahead. So you.
I write a lot. I write morning pages longhand. I'm one of those people, and write.
You're very disciplined about that every morning.
Every morning, but not always 3 pages, as Julia Cameron, specifies. I rarely write 3 pages, but it's also a great time for me to scribble poetry. So my notebooks are littered with poems that later on maybe get put into a computer and edited.
Yeah.
But I didn't write poetry for years. I used to write a lot of poetry, and my mother is, among many other things, a poet. But it was, again, during art lab that, and maybe I should just tell you, I keep referencing, maybe I should tell you the
Yeah,
story of
yeah,
what
lay
happened.
it out there. Let's hear it. We want to hear it.
So I was in this third cohort of art lab, and I went in, and there was this expectation from the very beginning that there would be some kind of art at the end,
So
some
yeah, yeah.
exhibit, some kind of creation. And I was still in the middle of one of the same novels that I was just talking about. This was a couple of years ago.
You hold on one second. So let me just explain to people. So the art lab cohort, the way that it works is that there's a theme each year, a, a theme around which our text studies are oriented and our conversations are oriented. And what was the theme? Was it Matana gift?
It was gift.
Yeah,
Yeah.
gift was the theme of the third cohort. And so during the course of the art lab, we studied gifts, studied gift as a concept in Jewish texts and Jewish culture, and then the expectation is that the artists will create some work for our exhibition that has, and it might be a pre-existing work that's being framed differently, or it might be something that they've created during the year, that was shown at the exhibition or performed at the exhibition or recited at the exhibition that relates to the theme. So that's what you're talking
Yes. And I think I would back up even more than in my own story to report that my background is as a theater artist, and having three children really made me have no art practice at all
about.
for some years.
Yeah.
Um, and even thought to myself, well, I guess now I'm just an Alexander technique teacher, and I've
Hmm.
left all of that behind.
Hmm.
Until the pandemic, when I realized, wow, no, I'm an artist. I've always been an artist. Can't
Yeah.
not be an artist.
Relatable. Yeah,
So
exactly.
Art Lab came at a time for me when I was really still searching. I mean, I had written a novel, I had been working my way back into an artistic practice, but still very searching, which I think is true all of the time. But I didn't have any idea what I might do for this end of the year project that we were doing together. And I went to, I think that Theater Dybbuk had come, and they had done a residency or some kind of thing. I went to an
Yeah.
event, and I don't remember very much about the event at all, but I do remember Liz, who was in one of the other cohorts, who I didn't know at all. Just this random person who was there. We were just saying, "Oh, what are you up to?" And she said, "Well, I'm taking this class on Jewish magic and female ritualists of the shtetl through the Jewish Theological Seminary." And I was like, "What?"
Right. That really resonated with you. I remember that. It was,
Yeah.
and this is Liz Ash Greenhill, correct? Who
Yes.
was also an
Yes.
art lab artist who has been
Mhm.
on, I think, in season 2 of this podcast. I think is when I spoke with Liz, and that's worth listening to. But yeah, go ahead.
Mhm. So I went right out and looked up that class, and I had missed the first one, but I said, I don't care, I'm signing up anyway. And it was with this lovely teacher, Annabelle Cohen, who's working on her PhD and who also is a Yiddishist and a Kohenet, and she's British. So I listened to the first class. I think I listened to a recording of it. I remember walking around the neighborhood. I'm always walking around my neighborhood. And she kept saying this word that I couldn't understand. She repeated it over and over. It sounded like Trina or Trina. And I was like, I have no idea what she's saying. And
Right.
it took me several classes in to understand that she, in her British accent, was saying what I would pronounce in my bad Yiddish accent, tkhina, and that it was a women's prayer, uh, women's in quotes. Actually, I think in some of the literature it describes it as a prayer for women or men who are like women, which is an
Oh,
interesting
really?
thing to unpack what
Interesting.
that means. But
Yeah.
the idea being that it was in the vernacular. It was a prayer that women could say on their own, not necessarily having access to communal prayer in Hebrew the way men had. Um, and they were first written by men for women, and then they were later written by women for women, and they addressed all the immediate concerns of women's lives. I thought that was so cool. And the very first thought I had was, oh, I should try to write some of those. And immediately I thought, oh, I could never write.
Uh-huh.
I could never do that. And
Yeah.
the third thought was, oh, that means I have to do it.
So wait, tell me about that though. Tell me about the first of all, why was there that voice that said I could never do that, and then why the competing voice that said now I have to do it?
Well, I think the I could never was the fact that I hadn't written poetry in years, and I think I
Mhm.
associate and I've never written something. I mean, I took the term very loosely, but I have never written something that I consider a prayer before.
And a tkhina is it's a poetic form?
Uh, I think so. Yeah,
But I mean,
and
it's
I certainly took it that way.
definitionally, it's not prose. It tends to look like a poem.
Yeah, I don't know if I don't
Okay.
have any like I have on my bookshelf over there that I could grab,
Well,
but yeah,
I'll try to find a link afterwards
yeah,
to put in the show
the
notes.
tkhines of the three gates. Yeah, that's an elevated language for sure, and at least it sounds to me
Yeah.
today,
Yep.
translations that I was reading. Um, and so this just thought of like I've never written prayers. I don't really want to write prayers. That's not really my deal, and I haven't written poetry for years. But the fact that I had such a strong and instant aversion to it kind of told me that there was maybe something there that was worth exploring for myself.
And is that something? Is that I mean, that sounds like the response to push back against an inner resistance. My guess is that probably shows up elsewhere in your life. Like if you are told or you tell yourself you can't do something, do you tend to then say, "Well, I have to do it"?
Perhaps, and I can't think of another example of that. If I do think of one, I will tell you because I always comprehend things better when I have a concrete example, but I am
Right.
sure that is the case.
Okay. But anyway, so
Actually,
it
yes.
came up. You were like, "All right, I've got to overcome this barrier."
Yeah, I remember being told as an undergrad that I couldn't major in performance theater and double major in philosophy and study abroad, and I was like, "Ha ha ha, watch me."
Okay. Right. See, there you go. I love that.
Um, so I just started scribbling these little snippets in my morning pages. And I had so much material because, as I said, they're domestic, and I am in the thick of it with three kids. All the things, the getting woken up in the middle of the night, and the nosebleeds, and the schlepping to after school activities, all of it. So
And
I ended up
that
writing,
resonated with what you had studied, that their
yeah.
very earthly, worldly, domestic concerns expressed
Mhm.
in there?
I mean, there are tachinas for making challah and for the mikvah, these sorts of things, the traditional ones. And so I just took very total artistic license and just wrote about anything that was happening. My goal was to write one a day, and I often wrote three or four. I mean, I churned out over 100 of these things in a really short,
Wow, that's really something.
and not all of them. I mean, most of them. In fact, I have one that I quite like that addresses the fact that most of them are horrible. They're not worth. They're private. Um, they're not worth necessarily sharing with the world, but it just kind of the floodgates opened up. And then when it came time to make a, the project, what does it look like? I think it was Shoshana who gave me the idea because of the domesticity piece to type them on. Maybe I even had the idea to write them on recipe cards. I can't remember. There was definitely some collaborative idea generating. Um, so I ended up pulling out my old manual typewriter that I got at a garage sale, decades ago. And I sat and picked out the ones I wanted to share and I typed them all out. My fingers got very strong. It's very different to type on a manual typewriter.
Yeah, it's true. People who've never experienced that don't know how challenging that is.
Yeah. And I filled a little recipe box, which became part of an installation that was part of our exhibit.
I
And when
remember.
I loved it. It was really, really fun, but I always hoped that they would have more life. But they don't really stand alone as individual poems. They kind of, to me at least, they really demand to be in a collection.
Interesting. Why is that?
I think because they're so short and there's no context. So I have submitted some of them to journals, and I have had other things published, but not none of the. None of the tkhines, which I think
Yeah.
has to do with the fact that they're just, I mean, maybe people don't like them. That's entirely possible, but also the fact that they need to be together to
Yeah,
kind of
that makes sense
realize
to me
them.
because 'cause they're kind of painting a portrait of, like, a life in a way.
Yeah.
So anyway, so you have all of these tachinot,
Mhm.
and what do you do with them?
What do I
Did
do with
did
them?
well, I mean, like, did these become the chapbook or no? That's
Yes,
just after.
yes. A selection of these, I think 27 in the end, became the chapbook.
Okay. Do you have any at hand that you're willing to share with us?
Oh, yes. It's easier to find on my computer, I
Okay.
think. Once upon a time, a mother was cursed by a witch to sleep for 100 years, and she lived happily ever after.
Any parent listening to that is like, absolutely. Yeah, I was gonna say that doesn't sound like a curse to me, man.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's so good. I love that so much, which obviously comes out of your own experience,
Yeah.
as
Yeah.
all the best poetry does. Yeah. So, what was it like to take these? I mean, it's so interesting because it's a very Jewish form,
Mhm.
although the reader wouldn't necessarily know that, or do you introduce it as such?
I do introduce it as such because a number of them have a direct address to the divine. And I played with a lot of different this the one I just spoke, recited doesn't have that, but many of them start by saying Shekhinah. And I used a number of different names of God, but I leaned pretty heavily on Shekhinah.
And why did you choose that name of God?
That to me as the sort of as a feminine
Mhm.
name
Yes.
resonated.
Yes. Yeah. So and was that so first of all I want to ask if that felt um vulnerable to you at all, like coming out with this kind of religious poetry, this Jewish poetry at this moment?
I would say it felt very vulnerable to me, but not necessarily at this moment. Um, I mean, every eh, being a Jew at this moment feels vulnerable. Like taking my kids to Hebrew school feels vulnerable.
Yeah.
But to me, the vulnerability of it was more this sort of aversion that I might have to religiosity, as it is so often in our country from a kind of fundamentalist Christian
Yes.
worldview.
Yes. And vulnerable in the sense of you didn't want to be misunderstood or misperceived.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah. So the language of addressing something to Shekhinah is not necessarily natural to you, or it feels still a little alien.
It's not that it's unnatural privately, but publicly for sure. And I also, again, one of my poems is about this. I tend to think of everything so broadly. When I use the word God or any variation of that, or magic, which is a word that I use a lot in those poems, I use it, I mean it so broadly to be,
Yeah.
it could be completely mundane, walking in some trees. That's it.
Sure.
It doesn't,
Sure.
but because other people have different understandings and definitions that I don't necessarily share, that felt vulnerable to me.
It's so interesting, especially. I mean, that's true even in any just a Jewish context. If people are talking about religiosity, spirituality, or God, it's all of those concepts are so multivalent that there's going to be miscommunication. But then you introduce that into publishing into an heterogeneous society,
Right.
and yeah, I mean that's the one of the great frustrations in teaching Torah. One of the great challenges, I should say, as a Torah teacher, is trying to get people to open themselves to the language of the tradition when their instinct is to shut down when they, in ways I understand,
Mhm.
when they encounter certain words and concepts. So,
Yeah.
I mean, interesting challenge for a writer. Right? Right? I mean, you're having to be very careful about these or just aware of how these words are landing with people in a way that might render you to be misunderstood.
Yeah, and also feeling like at a certain point, you have to just write what's coming, and you
Yeah.
can't worry too much about how people will take it.
Yeah. Yeah. So did you grow more comfortable with like now you're, somebody who's never met you and comes across one of these books is like, wow, she's like a really religious, spiritual person, this Bernfeld lady. Did you grow more comfortable with that idea? Or you just kind of decided to stop thinking about it?
I don't know. I have not, I mean, this is like just coming out.
Oh,
So I
right.
haven't had a lot of interactions with people around it yet.
Yeah.
Um, I certainly I was just speaking to a friend of mine the other day and saying, even though it has this Jewish frame, it's really about parenting. And that's that,
Got it.
all cultures.
Got it. So uh, you said that once you kind of opened the tahina valve, like it just started
Mhm.
pouring out. Is that normal for you? Is that how you usually work? Like it feels like it's
It
just coming and you
seems
need to
to
shake it?
be. Yeah. I mean, um I have always written. I mean, I started writing before I could actually write. I would dictate stories to my mother and she would write them down. But it's only been in the last 5 years or so that I've taken myself seriously as a writer. And not well. I wrote a lot about Alexander technique, or I wrote grants, or I wrote theatrical marketing things. But to write whatever I want
As an artist.
as an artist is still relatively new. But I realized after completing a thesis for an MFA that all writing is the same. You just keep going.
Oh, it's so hard. I
Yeah.
find it so hard to write. Yeah, it's but when you say you keep going, that just means like you don't when you feel that discouragement of like that didn't quite come out right, you just
Mhm.
keep going.
Yes. Or when you
Mhm.
feel when the valve shuts off or whatever, whatever the metaphor is, that doesn't mean the project is done. That means
Yeah.
it's just gotten a little harder.
Yeah, you're in a new phase. So and that's why it's I assume one of the reasons you do that what you called the morning writing. What did you call
Mhm.
it?
The morning pages, which is
Is
a
that a
practice
thing?
from
Is that like a known
It
idea?
is it's from The Artist's Way by Julia Cameron, which was a very big deal in the 1990s. Everyone was
Mhm.
reading her book and doing her program, which it's a book of, sort of like a 12-week program. But the core foundational practice of it is to write 3 pages longhand every morning when you first wake up.
Oh man. Like before coffee, you can have coffee.
She says, I would never stand between someone and their coffee.
Okay, smart. So wait, I'm curious. What happened 5 years ago that led you to decide, okay, I'm going to start being serious about thinking of myself and acting as a writer?
It was the pandemic, really. It was when everything shut down. It took me a really long time to build up my Alexander technique private practice. They say it takes 5 years to build a business. It took me 8. And I had just finally gotten to where I was teaching as much as I wanted to teach, as much as I had the energy to teach. And then this thought occurred to me that, like, oh, is this what I'm going to do for the rest of my life? And then everything shut down and I couldn't teach. I was teaching some college students still on Zoom, which was its own bizarre experience, but I couldn't teach any private lessons. And
Wow.
I just, yeah, as horrible as that time was for many people, and it was for me also a kind of creative reignition. I don't think that's a word, but I'm making it one. It reignited the sense of like, oh, I can't not be an artist. I can't not do art. And partly that is, I was a theater artist for a long time, and with three children in a pandemic, that was not a very attainable form. Theater art was not necessarily accessible.
Okay. I see.
But
I see.
sitting in a room by yourself and writing is pretty
Yeah.
accessible. There's another thing actually, because that year I, um, so many of the things that we all scrambled to try to fill the space with, um, counting the Omer that year, which I had never done before. Um, my, I don't know if it was, I think it was Cantor Ida Ray Kahana did a little Facebook video every day, and she read a little section of the Karen Kadar, I think is her name, book, the Omer. And there was one that she read that just absolutely stabbed me. And I don't remember exactly, a paraphrase. It was something about, when you were a child, what did you always want to do with your life?
Mm.
And I was like, well, when I was a child, what I wanted to do was write magical fiction.
And you had drifted away from that.
Yeah.
Wow, that's incredible. So for people who don't know, the counting of the Omer is this beautiful I was going to say tradition. It's more than a tradition. It's a mitzvah. For starting on the second night of Passover, you begin literally counting the days, and you say, like today is the first day of the Omer, and then the next night you say today is the second night, and over time it's been people have attached to each day a different dimension of spiritual, well, the Kabbalists at least attach to each day a different dimension of the experience of the divine and different human qualities, et cetera, et cetera. So it has this real deep spiritual resonance, and you ultimately count 7 weeks, and then you're at the holiday of Shavuot. Um, but that's beautiful. So you're, in a way, your artistic rebirth, renaissance came because of the counting of the Omer.
Yeah, which I hadn't exactly put together till this very conversation. But
Wow. So what a beautiful. Do you remember which day of the Omer it was? Because that would be a nice little anniversary.
the 19th day of the Omer. Nice number, too.
Yeah. Why do you say that?
Well, it's one more than 18. It's an odd
Right.
number. In my interest in Jewish magic, I've gotten interested in things like numbers. Even
So you were faced with this, like, okay, now I can do the Alexander technique as a business, and suddenly you were like, wait a minute, is all I am anymore? And because
Mhm.
and you were conscious you had left behind an artistic past.
Yes, I was also a drama teacher prior to becoming a certified Alexander teacher. And there was a transition around that too when I got pregnant with triplets. And I thought, well, I can't do all of these things. So I'm going to leave behind drama teaching and I'm going to focus on Alexander technique. Um, but we have a lot of transitions in our in our life.
Sure.
I just also, this is something I think I recall you talking about in one of the podcasts, and I don't remember which one, who you were interviewing, but just having a whole lot of interests. I've
Yeah.
always been kind of something of a generalist,
Yeah.
surrounded by specialists,
Yeah.
and never feeling like there was something wrong with me.
Yeah.
And finally realizing, no, I just have a lot of interests.
I'm the same way, and yeah, it's like a glass half full, half empty thing. There's such beauty that comes from that, and then sometimes I look over my shoulder at somebody who's been doing a deep dive on something for a decade, and I do wonder, gosh, what would that be like? So you had this awakening about magical fiction? Is that what you just said?
Yes, yes.
Okay.
Always magical, always speculative. I mean, I grew up on all the authors with the initials, C.S. Lewis and P.L. Travers, um,
J.R.R. Tolkien.
Tolkien. Yep, yep.
Mhm.
Oh, who was it? There was someone else I was just thinking of. I can't remember. But also Susan Cooper, who uses her actual name. But all of these largely British writers of
Hmm.
magical children's fiction.
Hmm.
That
And that was what was calling to you.
always. And when I went away to college, I, some people bring their stuffies to college as their security blanket. I brought my boxed set of the Chronicles of Narnia as my, which I
That's
know there are Christian allegories and all of that, but that,
great writing and great storytelling is what it is permanently. Before we turn on the record button, we were talking a tiny bit about fairy tales and your interest in them. And is this connected to, in your mind, to that genre of literature and what you've wanted to do with it?
Yes, definitely. Again, the sort of magical fiction, I had a childhood love, which is now a lifelong love of fairy tales. This is sort of ending up being by way of a biography too, but when I was about 2 or 3, my neighbor was babysitting for me and she took me to see Sleeping Beauty, like the Disney Sleeping Beauty. And I was so obsessed with that movie that for about many years afterwards, I was always in role as
Oh,
Princess Aurora. And everyone
so
else in my
cute.
life, I would assign a different role.
Right.
Um, I was sort of always in the land of make believe when I was a kid. I didn't really actually live in the real world very much. It was mostly pretend play all of the time.
Now, let me ask you a question. Why was that? Sometimes you hear kids doing that because their surrounding environment is very treacherous and challenging and difficult, but there may be other reasons.
Well, there were some challenges, and I was an only child, so there was also some solitude. I also think that it's just sort of my personality, and that's a thing coming back around to it as an adult. It's like, oh, I get to pretend like,
Right. I don't have to accept the world as it is on its face. There's a different, I can slip into
yeah.
this other dimension.
And as the work that I do in the world, my imagination is gets to be a huge part of that, creating something which hopefully, and I like to hope that art is a way of healing the world, tikkun
Sure.
olam, through, but
Yeah.
that is only created based on having the imagination.
Yes. Yeah. Let's stay on fairy tales for a second, and then I'm curious about how it's informed your own thinking or your own writing or your creative approach. So you loved Sleeping Beauty,
Hmm.
and you were Princess Aurora all the time.
I know, and that, which is embarrassing to admit now. I'm
No
much more
way. No
interested in
way.
witches
Embrace it.
and crones
Embrace
and
it.
all of that,
I love it.
not blonde
So
sopranos.
yeah. So then, I mean, but did you become interested in fairy tales as such? Like you're interested in other fairy tales as well?
I I just loved to collect fairy tale books as a child. I still have all my fairy tale books, and then I've also accumulated a lot more as an
Yeah.
adult. Um, when I recently read a retelling, there's this author that I really love named Veronica Shanis. She's a Jewish writer, speculative writer. For her day job, she is a professor of fairy tales.
Oh
Um,
wow.
she wrote a short story called The Jew and the Thorns, which is based on the Brothers Grimm tale of that name. And it's a unpacking and retelling and rearranging of an incredibly anti-Semitic fairy tale. When I read
Wow.
her story, I was like, oh my God. I went
Yeah.
right back to my complete works of Brothers Grimm and read the original and was like, oh my God, it's as bad as you would think.
Yeah. It's so interesting you say that because one of the things that comes up for me about fairy tales is that you'll sometimes hear people say like, "Oh yeah, her life was a fairy tale," like as though that's supposed to mean it was this wonderful thing. Fairy tales are so
So
dark.
dark.
There's
Yes.
always this, I mean, it's true. There is also the fairy tale ending, so many of them end in this lovely way. But yeah, were you drawn to that dimension of it?
Yes. When I was first out of college, I worked for a theater company in New York called the New Victory Theater. And I got to do a pretty deep dive on fairy tales because of a play. We were presenting the young Vic from London doing a Grimm fairy tales. And it was not the Disney version of the fairy tales. It's
Right.
the,
It wasn't cleaned up.
cutting the wolf open to get
Mm,
Little Red Riding Hood out,
mm.
kind of, or Cinderella's stepsisters cutting off parts of their bodies to fit their feet into the
Oh
sepulcher,
my
that kind
god!
of
Is
stuff. Super bloody.
that's part of the original?
Oh yeah, one cuts off her toes and one cuts off her heel.
Wow.
I
Wow.
got to write a study guide about fairy tales and do tons of research. I was like, I can't believe I'm getting paid for this. Um,
Where can people find that, by the way?
oh, I don't even know if it still exists. It was
Okay.
it was for students who came to see the show, but
Okay.
I mean, I also love, I'm just pulling up another visual aid for anyone who's watching, The Bloody Chamber by Angela Carter,
Okay.
another British writer who has these feminist um, retellings of fairy tales.
Hmm.
So yeah, they're, as I understand it, and this is going based on research I did 25 years ago. The Brothers Grimm and those folks went around and listened to the stories that women were telling as they were doing their labor, and they wrote them down, and then they took out the sex, added some extra violence, and sold them to children.
Wow.
It's sort of like, add some sugar and call it a children's thing. But that's sort of still how we market to kids, like, just violent it up a little.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Although they're often in like in movies for kids, there's often it's missing that that like haunting darkness that some of them very jarring,
Yeah,
But you were drawn to that. You like that as a dimension of the
I do, and
overall
it's funny
genre.
because I don't like horror. Like, I'm not one of those people. I cannot watch a horror movie.
Uh-huh.
So I wouldn't say that I'm universally drawn to that sort of thing, but as far as the darkness, I feel like it's part of
Yeah.
humanity,
Exactly. Look around. Yeah.
and that fairy tales, like ghost stories, that's how we cope. I mean,
Yes.
that's why we tell these stories, to
Yes.
cope with the darkness around us.
Yes. Yeah. So how has that influenced your own work?
Well, that actually, going back to these middle grade novels that I've referenced, are totally filled with Jewish magic. Um, whether that be exploration of the evil eye in one of them or shadim in the other, that is what I'm super interested in right now.
And so that's what you're writing about. The novels you're working
Yeah,
on are in this genre for that audience.
yeah, yeah.
And are you I'm not sure quite how to ask this. Are you deliberately introducing Jewish ideas into them, or that's just kind of naturally comes out of who you are?
It is, well, it was a huge brain exploding moment to discover that Jewish magic is not an oxymoron,
Right.
um, which I think has happened to a lot of people like me who didn't know a lot about, people who, also, I grew up without a lot of Jewish community, but the Jewish community that I had was very, probably, my grandparents went to a Reform synagogue. Like, it was stripped of a lot of that content.
In our generation, I think there's been like a little bit of a desire to reclaim and recover some of those strange peculiarities of our of that we feel might be missing from our world.
Because as a kid who grew up reading magic, fairy tales, fantasy from other traditions, it was
Right.
amazing to, that I could write a fantasy novel, which I've always wanted
Ah,
to do, and I don't have to mine anyone else's culture for that
I
material.
see.
It already exists.
This thing that you loved so much growing up, you didn't realize was actually in your own
Yes,
background.
exactly.
Yeah. Can you tell us give us a little taste of something you're working on and some dimension of, or some aspect of Jewish magic that's informing your current work?
Well, the book that I've just written won to shitty first draft, and I use shitty first draft from Annie Lamott, as a loving term, um, is so very very new that everything is subject to change. But it's about a girl who is having kind of a rough time in a lot of different areas of her life, and then through a series of kind of unfortunate events, gets some dust in her eye that causes her to see shadim, which
Oh, wow. But
are,
tell people what that word means.
it's demons,
Yeah.
Jewish demons, which, according to not obscure religious sources, I mean, like the Talmud, there
Yeah.
are, or even Psalms, like there are, they are invisible and they surround us all of the time.
Right.
Um,
Right.
so the idea that if you could see them, it would be horrifying.
Oh man, what a cool idea. So wait, you came up with the idea that because she has something affecting her vision that empowers her to see the shading.
Yeah, but it's, I mean, there's a, again, I didn't make that part up. It's like the ashes of the afterbirth of a black cat
Wow.
who was the
Wow.
firstborn of another black cat. I mean, again,
Oh,
that goes straight back to those original sources. And it's like, I
I,
just had to put her in a situation where she could get that in her eye and boom.
I love it. What is it like to, when you're writing for kids, are you in a sense writing for yourself, for your previous self?
Yes,
Hmm.
very much.
Hmm.
There's a whole lot of, again, growing up always pretending I was having some adventure, and now in a way I'm having that adventure.
Hmm. Hmm.
I used to
And
go around looking in cupboards just in case I could get to Narnia.
an artist imagining a younger audience, do you feel that your books have to have some kind of pedagogical angle? Like you need to be teaching, or there needs to be a positive lesson, or are you just writing to see what comes out?
I I do. I mean, it's tricky because nobody likes a message book. Nobody
Hmm.
likes a pedantic
Hmm.
morality tale. And I feel absolute responsibility to be
Yeah.
writing toward, um, I mean, I think that that book that I just described, which sounds really dark and really weird, is really about love your neighbor.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. And
When
so
it comes to it,
you're
she has to engage in the community where she is and find that.
right. Yeah, you don't want kids reading that book and then walking away with the question, how can I get the ashes of a black cat? That's kind of and then looking
Yeah.
online as to how to make that possible.
Oh
You,
dear. Yeah.
but
Yeah.
but you also don't want to hit them over the head, it seems like, and make it feel pedantic, as you said.
Yeah. And who knows how that, if I'll ever hit it, because these books
Yeah.
are not in the world yet.
Yeah, yeah. So, and how many books are in the kitchen, so to speak?
4 at
Yeah.
various
Well,
stages, but I can't be, some of them
yeah.
are way far back.
And when you're writing, are you tapping into that, like that delighted child, or is it just like a slog sometimes?
Both. Yeah.
Yeah.
It is often a total slog. Um, actually 5, 'cause I have another poetry project that's kind of
Uh-huh.
cooking
Hmm.
too.
Hmm. And the way you get through that slog is just discipline, and you just keep doing it.
Just keep doing it. And sometimes it means writing doesn't always look like
Hmm.
sitting on my butt in front of a computer
I
pushing myself
understand.
to type.
Yeah,
I really
I
think
understand.
walking and being out in nature is often the best way
Uh-huh.
to write.
Yeah. I'm curious if these how your recent Jewish encounters, meaning what you learned in that class, art lab, your current writing, have they shaped you as a have they changed you as a Jewish person? Have they changed the way you think of yourself as a Jew, or what it means to live a Jewish life?
Yes, I think so. And it's all part of a bigger process too. Um, I'm losing my train of thought here. I've always been an artist, but my work has never been explicitly Jewish until the last 5 years. Those two things were just worlds apart. And also, I grew up um, strongly identifying as a Jew in Jackson Hole, Wyoming, where there were very few Jews, in a family without, and this is like always feels like a coming out whenever I say it, my mother's not Jewish. So even people in my own family, like my aunts or my cousins, maybe didn't consider me Jewish. So I've never
Ah,
felt Jewish enough.
interesting.
Um, I then had opportunities to go to services with relatives. I had a cousin in New York that I met when I was in college who I just loved him and his whole family um, and his community, and that was like, oh, it could be like this. And finding different spaces like that in different places that I live. But it really was having kids for me. Like for a lot of people, to buckle down and be like, okay, I have to find my community. It was actually the combination of having kids, and then a couple years later, the 2016 election, and feeling like, okay, I need a community
Yes.
to help with
Navigating.
yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
navigating for myself and my family, but also how I can be involved in helping in some way. It can't just be individual; it has to be communal.
Yeah. Well, there's
So that,
nothing much more Jewish than that
yeah,
impulse.
and that ultimately led me to the thing that rabbis my whole life would always say, well, you could always convert, when I would tell them about my background. And I was I resented the hell out of that comment, that I needed to convert.
Why? Because it made you feel how?
It made me feel not Jewish. Like they
Yeah.
also were seeing me as not Jewish.
Yeah. Yeah. It made you
Um,
feel like an outsider.
it made me feel like an outsider, when I know that they were not intending that. At
Yeah.
least I don't think so.
Yeah.
But it was, again, I'm going to reference her twice in this, at least twice. Ida Ray Kahana, having a conversation with her, and she phrased it totally differently. She said, "Why don't you just go get in the mikveh?" I
Hmm.
was like, "Yeah,
Right.
why
Right.
not?"
She made it sound like kind of a technicality or something, or a beautiful
Yeah,
opportunity. Yeah.
exactly. Like this
Yeah.
chance to, yeah, I don't know how to say it better than what you just said. So my kids and I did. And then I felt like I walked in as a half Jew and I walked out as a Jew.
Yeah, so shout out to Cantor Ida Ray Kahana, who just this past year retired.
Retired, yeah.
Wonderful force, along with her husband Rabbi Michael Kahana, who's really shaped this generation of congregation Beth Israel, and yeah, all of us have enjoyed Ida Ray's beautiful voice over the years. So mazel tov
Yeah.
to her, and good. I think she's the first cantor to get two shout outs, maybe
Ooh.
the first cantor to get any shout outs. Yeah.
Well, they
So wait,
deserve it. All the cantors deserve it.
yeah, it's true. Um, Listen, I have a question. I want to ask you about the Alexander technique and
Yeah.
tell us a little bit about that. Is it relevant to your work as an artist, or it's just your profession? And remind me what it is.
So the Alexander technique is an educational method that involves improving our neuromuscular coordination. So how we respond to stress, how we posture, how we move, how we breathe, kind of addressing a lot of deep-seated habits that are below the level of awareness, but they're
Hmm.
causing harm. And I'm going to demonstrate by, lifting my shoulders and shrinking my neck and crunching,
Yeah,
which my students named, one of my college students call that turtling.
right. Yeah.
But that becomes our how we move through the world, and it's not
Wow.
necessarily benign. It can cause all kinds of situations in how we function if we are constantly shaping ourselves in these unconscious ways. So Alexander technique is a way to learn how to become aware of and stop
Okay.
patterns of what Alexander calls misuse of ourselves.
Yeah.
And it's very the thing that's really interesting to me about Alexander technique is it's often phrased as like a body movement thing. But Alexander rejected the idea of mental and physical as separate.
Separation. Yes.
So he was very much into the unity of the individual human. And to me, that is entirely every kind of art that I am interested in involves the intellect, the imagination, the body, everything. Like we're always the sort of whole enchilada.
Right.
So I've written over the years several things kind of poking at Cartesian dualism. So I loved that Rabbi Adina Allen brought that up when you interviewed her. I was like,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
take
That's
that,
right.
Descartes, poor Descartes. But
So how has that affected your work, or is that too hard to articulate?
well, I came to it by way of art, first of all, because a lot of musicians, actors, dancers study the Alexander technique, and that's how I first heard about it. It definitely came directly out of my theater background. Um, And it's a mental practice. I just said there's no difference between mental and physical, and then I threw out mental, but
Right.
it's a practice not unlike meditation. That's about learning some kind of um, self-regulation, all of which is incredibly helpful when you are trying to do anything hard. And since so many
Yeah.
things in life, including writing, are hard, I use it all the time. I mean, I use it just to sit or,
Wow.
you know,
I'm really interested to explore this because it's resonating in a number of ways with me, both as an individual and for people I know who I think might benefit from it. Yeah, I'm reminded now of all the good things I've heard about it over the years. Wow. And so, do you still? Is this still part of your life? I don't mean in your own practice, as a business.
yes, I teach private lessons and I currently teach in the performing arts department at the University of Portland.
Oh, fabulous! So you're teaching other artists about the Alexander technique.
Yes. So at this point, primarily musicians. They come for a private lesson, sort of like they go to their piano lesson every week. They also come to their Alexander lesson, which is not how to play the piano, it's more
Yeah.
how to play myself.
Yes. Wow. Beautiful. Um, I would love to explore that more with you, but we're out of time, and I want to ask you the Eve Bernfeld the final two questions. One is just what's something that you are loving these days that you want people to know about.
Yeah, I thought maybe way too much about this. I have like I could fill
Like,
pages, I could fill hours. But on Friday, I had the opportunity to go see this Ursula K. Le Guin exhibit at Oregon Contemporary, which is in my neck of the woods. So it's hyper local and it was brilliant. It's just a great exhibit
oh,
about
wonderful.
great local artist who I love. And
Yeah.
she was also a mother of 3 children. So she's a hero of mine in that way.
That's I'm gonna I'm gonna mention my mom in her book club is reading Ursula Le Guin, The Left Hand of Darkness right now,
Mhm.
and I'm gonna mention this. Maybe I'll take her to go see
Yes.
that.
Yeah. I think you
Wonderful.
would love it.
Okay, and then what is the best Jewish food?
Okay. So I could say, I could agree with a dozen different things, but the one that I want to say is not specifically Jewish, but is Jewish to me, and that is roast chicken.
Mm,
My
absolutely.
grandmother would always roast a chicken for Shabbat. My grandfather raised backyard chickens in Tucson before that was a thing. Um,
Right.
Everyone in
He
my
didn't do it.
family,
He didn't do it as a hipster. He just did it as a
no,
grandpa.
no, he was like, grew up on the Lower East Side of Manhattan and then moved
Yeah.
to the wilds of Arizona, but he
Yeah.
lived in an upscale neighborhood and he had chickens and all of his neighbors hated him for
Right.
that. But everyone in my family makes a roast chicken. My husband and I have made roast chicken for Shabbat almost every week since our children were born, and it's one of
I
the
know.
few meals that everyone will eat.
I know. It's
So,
actually it's I have to make an effort not to cook chicken on Shabbat because it's so much a part of my upbringing. I mean, not, I love
mhm,
it, but sometimes you want a little variety. But for
yeah,
me, a house that smells of roast chicken
mhm,
or the chicken stock that follows the
yeah,
preparation of the bird that's smells like Shabbat to me. I love that answer.
yeah. Oh, goody, you get it.
Eve, this was so fun. Thank you. I really appreciate your time and good luck on all of the irons you have in the fire. I can't wait to see what comes out of them.
Oh, thank you. It was really fun to talk to you.
All right. Be well. Take care.
You too. Bye.